Imagine everything you love about the hobby in the palm of your hand. An entire store at your fingertips. Everything you need to know about cards is within your grasp. Unlock the secrets of the hobby. Plus, so much more. You don't have to imagine anymore. It's here. Card Ladder. Get the app today.
Yo.
What's up?
Hey, man, we are really early today.
Dude, that's how it is. Whenever you want to be, whenever you're expecting it to take a while, it's going to be quick.
Yep, it's true. I was just Googling as I was tapping the go live button repeatedly if there's anything in documenting this problem, and there's not. So Breaking Sports says, thank you for saving me from the YouTube black hole. I'm not sure if this black hole is much better, but you're welcome.
Just a different size hole.
Rodman, what's up? What's up, man? Rodman, you're going to Miami, aren't you? I think he is. Mike, hello, Mike. Do you have a mail day? Any mail days?
Nope.
No. Okay. Well, I'll do mine. It's nothing big. You're welcome, Michael. I've got a mail day. It's nothing big, but I'll do it now. If I can just remember how to turn the camera on. There we go. Here it is.
Oh, nice.
This is the 2020 Prism Gold football. Christian McCaffrey. No secret that I'm a big fan of the way Prism looks this year. And this is number 4 of 10. So,
Cool card, man.
thank you. Very happy about that card. Christina looks like she has something to say. No. Christina just woke up from a nap, so she's bashful when she wakes up from naps. Oh, right.
Don't you know that running backs are bad investments?
That's how hard I zag. I zag to the worst investment imaginable. That's called being ahead of the curve. That's called finding a whole new curve. Well, I will highlight 2 things as we let people come in. They didn't think we were going to start for a few more minutes, so let me just highlight two things worth highlighting. The first one is that Christina was on Stacking Slabs today with Brett. And if you would like to listen to that episode, here's how. You just go to feed. Let's say you don't want to scroll the feed. Type in Christina. And there you go. Hobby Hustle, talking women in the hobby, card art, and Luca with Christina from Card Ladder. It's a very good episode. Nicely done. Well done, Christina. And then the second issue or thing that I'll highlight is that tomorrow night, Jeremy from Sports Cards Live will be giving away a 1-year Card Ladder Pro membership. He will be giving it away 1 year on Sports Cards Live. And I think some of us might appear, Christina might appear for a few minutes to talk about it. So that is worth looking forward to. Nice graphic by Jeremy, by the way. That looks great. So check that out on Sports Cards Live tomorrow night. I don't know what we have to do to be able to give a free membership away in the crossover, but
you can get one away right now if you want.
I don't know. You can organize that. I don't even.
No, you can do that.
Christina called. Christina called my bluff very quickly.
Yes, I did.
Okay. But maybe we'll do that. I don't know.
Maybe Christina will organize it next week.
She's like, be better at marketing right now, and you're like,
Yeah, that's. Sorry, guys. Shouldn't have even teased that.
That's kind of effed.
Yeah. So we had a lot of questions, and we have a guest for hour 2. So maybe we'll start mowing some of them down now. Apologies in advance to anybody who was planning on jumping on at the top of the hour when we're supposed to start. But catch the replay, and you can catch the first few minutes. So the first topic is actually something we covered earlier this week, but let's go ahead. It's a good one to circle back to here to start. This comes from Wade Zoe, and they simply write, PWCC's premier auction.
Yeah.
So let's talk a little bit about it. I believe it begins May 10th, runs for 10 days, ends May 20th. Well, or maybe it ends May 21st, depending upon how long extended bidding goes for.
Right.
It's focused on cards that are expected to sell $50K and up. In order to bid, you need to be approved. And it's coming up quick, right? So do you know anybody who has gone through the approval process and how smooth or difficult it might be?
Well, I don't mean to brag, but I did make it through myself. No, it wasn't too bad. They emailed me, and I told them my name and who I was, and they're like, "Let that guy." No, I'm just kidding. They asked to see bank statements, and so I sent them screenshots of how rich I am, and I'm in.
Wow, very
I
impressive.
just want to know that you can pay for something that's 50 grand or more.
Which is not unreasonable. It's not an unreasonable ask. Nope.
And then the whole thing took 2 days of back and forth on, I think, 4 total emails, and then it just said, like, you're eligible, congratulations. It's pretty painless.
Nice, but it took a little while. So for those planning on bidding on May 10th, probably a good time to get going on that.
Took about 3 days from start to finish.
3 days. Talking Sports Guy says he just missed the cut by about 49K.
I sent him a picture of my Venmo with $50 in it, and they said no.
I wonder if I could send a pile of Prism-based PSA 10s, just like a.
I sent him a picture of my Flickr.
No, oh well, that's what more.
I was like, dude, I have equity. I mean, you guys got to take this as value. If I win something,
Right.
I'll sell one of these.
Definitely. Maybe I could just show them this. And that would probably fast track the approval. I could be approved in a day, 24 hours if I showed them that.
I sent them a picture of my card ladder collection.
The member estimated value.
Right.
Nice. So what do we think about this? I think this is quietly actually a pretty big deal in the hobby right now.
Agreed. Yeah, I think it's cool, man. It's no secret that I like PWCC. I just, I like their branding. I like their website. It's very easy to navigate. I like their, I like the way that they approach the hobby. They've obviously made mistakes in the past, but I feel like they've always done a nice job of recovering and taking listings down at the appropriate time, and thinking most importantly, I think they do a good job of thinking about the long term of the hobby. I think that they realize the way that we're all going to be the most successful here is to treat this through the lens of a long game, and so I like them. So I'm excited about it to see how it goes. I'm optimistic about it. I mean, it might be a little rocky on the first one, I'd be a little nervous potentially having a card in this first one, just because you don't know if enough bidders are going to get registered in time, and there's just a big unknown. So good luck to them, and hopefully it goes smoothly.
Yeah, and it's not really like peak market-wise right now. It's more of a trough.
They might kick it off though.
Dude, that's a great point. It was in fact the golden auction of late January that perhaps was the main catalyst in launching a very prosperous February hobby-wise. So that's a great point. It's a great point. And it ends May 20th, which will happen right before the Dallas Card Show begins. So there could be a lot of energy and momentum generated by that. It also ends during the play-in tournaments. The NBA play-in games, I believe, take place between May 18th and May 23rd or something like that. So could be an interesting interesting set of events.
It could be where the cards, like I was scrolling through a bunch of these graphs. I don't know if you were paying attention, but like a lot of them are doing this sort of jump up in February,
Yeah.
down in March, and a lot of them are kind of going creeping back up. At least these ones that I'm, it's like these kind of graphs. It's like
Yeah.
it peaked in February, late February, and it's it's possible that that auction could kind of continue this upward trend. Like, would you rather have your card in an auction that is trending prices upwards, but is about the same price, versus a card that's like coming down in price, like the Fleer 86 Jordan, where it's coming down, but it's still like a pretty high price? It's almost like people would rather just be on the upward trend, even if it is like an actual lower price, than on the downward trend, you know?
Yes, agreed. Much seems to be a better opportunity to get an unexpectedly higher price when enthusiasm is on the uptick rather than peaking or coming down.
Yeah.
I suppose.
Be on the upward trend, even if it is.
Oops. I damn.
Did you just click your live?
Yeah, because I wanted to show the polls that I was running, but I'm not. Damn. I ran a few polls today too that touch on this topic.
Oh yeah, give us the results.
Yeah. So one of the polls was,
Yeah.
Can you see my stories even if I'm live? One of the polls was, are you feeling optimistic about the hobby?
Yeah, second.
Oh, excellent. Thank you. And let's see what the result was. The result of this poll, it was a 90-10 split. Are you optimistic about the future of the hobby? 90% said yes, 10% said no. But, and I'm no poll master, but you always ask the second question too, which sometimes is the more instructive one. The second question is, do you think that other people are optimistic about the future of the hobby? And that one was a 75-25 split. In yes. So 75-25 yes, that we think other people are optimistic, versus 90-10 that we ourselves are optimistic.
The second one is the real answer.
Yeah, exactly. It might be.
The first one is what I'm telling myself because I have a lot of money invested and I need it to go.
Even a 75-25 split though is
right. Staggering.
Yeah, that's a lot of optimism. But we are optimistic people in this hobby, to be sure.
Yeah, that's one thing that we talked about with the whole us v and NFTs and Top Shot is like, we're a pretty like defensive, optimistic group about what we collect and stuff.
Yeah, we are. Another poll I asked was, will the values of active basketball players increase before the NBA playoffs? 75-25 yes. Interesting result. And then the last one I asked was, which card will be worth more in a year? LaMelo's Prism Rookie or Justin Herbert's Prism Rookie? And it was pretty even, 53-47. That is an insightful one because, thank you, Christina. That's an insightful one because football, man, has really made some strides when it comes to the big prospects. Those guys really are on a par with, on a dollar for dollar basis on individual card prices. They're right up there with basketball now. So I found that to be pretty interesting. Market cap wise, they're still lagging, but there's just far less football. But Josh Allen and Luka are both 2018 Prism rookie class, and their PSA 10s trade for an identical amount. But Luka has like 16,000, and Josh Allen has some small fraction of that. So market cap wise, it's not even close.
Yeah, Herbert stuff's on fire right now. In the last month, it's down a bunch. It's down a little bit in the last month. I apologize. It's down over the last 3 months. Yeah, I mean he was pretty high, I guess, before that.
Yeah. So it's interesting. Yeah, a couple polls there. Okay. This question comes from Dormant Stash. We had a few more like entry level questions that I found refreshing. This one from Dorman Stash. He says, I'm new to bidding on eBay. Can you go more into each of your bidding strategies? So what do you think? Bidding and just buying strategies on eBay, I think, in general.
Yeah. I mean, on the auction side, I'm a sniper. I don't even touch it until the last few seconds. And I pointed out to you recently, but on the app, I will wait for the 15-minute notification, and then it gives me an option to remind myself 1 minute away. I take advantage of that, and then when there's 1 minute left, I just stare at it, get my price ready, and bid it like 6 or 5 seconds, and then hope I win. And then, looking for best offers, buy it now, understanding what price you're looking to pay based on comps, using things like Card Ladder and 130 Point to figure out the value of the card. And then setting a target price and trying to, if you can potentially get it cheaper. Auctions are nice because, it's like, short of like it being shilled, you're going to pretty much pay what it's worth. You either win it or you don't. Whereas best offer, a lot of times the prices will be way higher than the value and you're just not willing to go over. So you just kind of leave it sitting there. But there's definitely a lot of cards available on best offer that you can find deals and potentially get the card you're looking for.
Good. I don't really have anything to add to that. Sniping is definitely the way to go. It's fun as well.
Yep.
And well, let me pivot into a question that I now see a good connection to, even though I didn't see one earlier when I was assembling. Here it is. Carrot Top Cards says this: I was participating in a PWCC auction recently, where 2 copies of the exact same card, same grade, were finishing within seconds of each other. The cards are valued at over $30K each. I was outbid on the first listing with about a minute to go. It was just higher than I was willing to pay. So I turned around and bid on the second listing instead. However, with about 15 seconds to go in the first listing, the leading bidder of the first item retracted their bid, making mine the default winning bid. So now suddenly I'm the winner of both cards. Luckily, somebody outbid me at the last second on the first item, and I ended up only winning the second listing. Bullet dodged.
I hate that trick, man.
So he says, what's the hobby etiquette in that situation? There's no way I could have paid for both. So maybe explain this situation and how it happens and what people are up to, and then let's talk about the hobby etiquette of how to navigate something like that.
Well, so the trick is you put in a high bid to take the lead, and then that deters people from wanting to bid. So they ignore it and they move on. And then you retract the bid and it lowers the value of it because no one else was watching it. So the person could potentially get it cheaper on a second account, or maybe they were the second highest bid on another account. So that's the trick, and it sucks. It's like the opposite of shilling. You're like lowering the price.
Reverse shilling.
And then what was it? What was your other question?
What's the etiquette? How do you suppose?
Oh, if he would have won both.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, the first thing I do is message the seller and explain the situation. And the crappy part about that is, like, most sellers, just pretty much fairly assume that anyone that messages them looking to get out of the deal is doing it, because they're trying to get out of paying, or because they're, for the wrong reasons, basically. But in that case, I'd probably message the seller first, explain the situation, see if there's anything you guys can work out. Obviously, you'd feel bad about it, hopefully, and express that remorse in your messaging to the seller. I'm not sure of anything else you could really do at that point other than asking eBay to get involved if the seller's not willing to help you. But it stinks because you usually don't get the benefit of the doubt lately on eBay, where people are posting every message and stuff of people trying to get out of deals and kind of shunning them from the hobby. And in some cases like this one, it sounds like you have a pretty good reason to want to back out of it.
Yep. Well said. And it's something I suppose to be aware of. And I think there is something of a burden on the seller's end to be understanding if it happens in that very unique scenario where the same seller is listing the same card ending within seconds, and people are up to these types of shenanigans. But I also think the maxim that carries the day is never have outstanding potential bids that are larger than your capability to pay. So really take those bid obligations seriously. Because ultimately those are sort of, they're contractual obligations to honor that bid. So take those seriously. I see that we have Josh. Are you still there? I see. You looks like you might be timed out. Oh, he is gone. Somebody in the chat type something and let me know if you guys are still with me here. Or maybe it's me who's gone. Oh, people are still here. Good. Let's bring Josh back in. And I see you guys in the chat. So just let Josh come back in so he doesn't miss anything. There he is.
Yeah, keep going.
Okay. So a couple people in the chat, and more than a couple. Drake points out, I didn't think you could retract bids under 12 hours. Card porn echoes that. A couple other people echoed it as well. Nines are fine, however, says, I think that you can. Card porn says, but eBay put in the 12-hour rule a little while ago, so this no longer can be done. So it looks like that may have been a recent change. Long Island Sports Card says, if the listing is ending in less than 12 hours, you can retract your most recent bid if it's been less than an hour since you placed it. Okay. So this is very nuanced here. So if it's under 12 hours to go, you can only retract, apparently, your bid if you placed it within the last hour. All right. So
I was about to give you the... All right, whatever. Yeah, I guess that makes sense.
So
Not really, though.
Yeah, that's just a bad situation. As somebody points out, PWCC blocks non-paying bidders too. So
they're running out of blocks.
right.
You can only block so many people.
True. Okay. I mean, this is one of those no-win situations where we really wish people wouldn't manipulate bidding like that, but they do. And so both sides are going to have to be understanding of these scenarios, and hopefully we can catch the culprits, and eBay will drop the hammer on them. Yeah, tough situation though. Something to be aware of. Definitely ask sellers to be understanding if that happens, and buyers too. Like say for example, you're selling a card and someone pulls off the reverse shill, and the card sells for 1/10 of its market value or something because somebody effectively pulled off the maneuver. That's a really annoying situation as well, right? So, don't know if I have any good news there. K Dizzle's Cards asks, do you think it's good that we have a lot of different platforms to buy, sell, trade, or do you think a one-stop shop platform that is specifically for cards would be a better option? My opinion on this is neither. I think the best option is something similar to eBay or to Amazon. If Amazon, well, let me say this. I think eBay is the best option right now because while it is the overwhelming preferred method for buying and selling cards, and it's and prices that are realized on eBay are treated as the comp that most people will reference. The other nice thing about eBay is that it's a marketplace for many other items, and people who have nothing to do with sports cards know about eBay and are familiar with it and use it a lot. So it makes it easy for newcomers to get involved in the marketplace because they trust the brand of eBay. So they don't feel that they don't have this double risk of, oh, I don't know how to navigate sports cards and this platform is weird. Should I trust it with my bank account information? No, there's credibility and trust built into eBay. You can trust them as much as you can trust anybody with account information. Whereas if it's a foreign platform and you're foreign to cards, that might actually prevent you from ever getting in the first place. So I think it's important that the platform has a brand that's much, much bigger than cards. I think that's a huge advantage that gets overlooked. And I would say Amazon certainly has equal brand, but eBay has something Amazon doesn't, which is auctions. And auctions are so important because they are ways to force the action. And sometimes when you need to move on from cards and the market is stagnant, you need to force some action. And maybe you need to take a lower price than the last comp, but you need the card to move. So you send it to auction and force people to move. So those are my thoughts on that. Josh, what do you think? Is it good to have a lot of different platforms? Is it good to have a one-stop shop? What do you think?
Yeah, I'll try to play devil's advocate just to give a different thought, but eBay does have some issues that prevent it from optimizing for cards. I think maybe as the counter argument to where they're too generic, and some of the different practices in place for their platform and the way that you look at the items and list them might not be optimized for cards, and there could be a more optimal platform. And all these ones that are competing right now, potentially one or two of them could emerge as the winner, and the one that builds the best platform with the most optimized for buying and selling on that platform, and the one that ultimately helps drive the highest values for cards could be the winner, both on like a technical side, who has the best technology, who has the best marketing, et cetera, et cetera. So there could be a platform that surpasses eBay in terms of what drives the highest value. But yeah, your point is also well taken.
And I agree with that. There is a lot left to be desired when it comes to listing things for sale on eBay and finding them. There's a lot left to be desired. And we certainly tip our hats, as much of the chat is doing right now, to MySlabs. Definitely an excellent marketplace that does a high volume and is trustworthy and credible in buying and selling cards. And they have got some really awesome cards on there. They've got some good people on their team too. So hat tip to MySlabs. And thank you to MySlabs for funneling data to us at Card Ladder and helping us get more and more accurate comps from different marketplaces. Appreciate you guys. Okay, next question. We've talked about that topic a lot, so there's more to say about it, but it's on other episodes, all right, question from Cardboard Junkie. He says, he's from Australia. My mate, meaning his friend, suggested to me last year to sell my Michael Jordan Scoring Kings PSA 10 when it hit $4,000 so that I could build a war chest so that I could buy other MJs that had not popped yet. I'm glad that I didn't sell. I find it very hard to sell anyway, but I feel like this is a concept that's widely applied that I'd like to know more about. So let's talk about the concept of a war chest and what is this all about?
So that card sells for about 20 grand right now. So
right.
The war chest is an amount of cash that you have ready to spend on a card that could potentially come up soon, hopefully, but you don't know of it yet. Or it could be something is coming to auction soon. Maybe you've looked forward to a preview of an auction and you want to get some cash ready to make a run at a big card. So that's the war chest.
And do you find it? I find that building a war chest is really an important skill, an important discipline.
Yeah.
It's something that you need when you're grail hunting and you're not a multimillionaire who just has, lots of cash on hand at all times.
Yeah, I think the sentiment of the question, I'll just kind of take a guess, but it's like, this question comes up a lot, and I'll answer it the same as I always do, but like, should I be nervous to sell something too early? Should I try to time it perfectly where I sell at the peak? How do I do that? And I'm always the one that tells you, take profit whenever you're comfortable with it, even if you are like nervous that it's going to go up in value soon, because you could take that money that you sold the card for, even the Scoring Kings PSA 10, if you would have sold it for $4 grand, he potentially could have outperformed the 20K that's existing on this card if he had bought something on the CL index, for example, and it would have 7x. Did you say this was last year?
I don't think he specified it. It may have been last year. I already deleted the question. Sorry.
So he was talking about 4,000. It's like over a year ago. So if he would have bought a different card, even just on the CL index, he would have still outperformed that potential sale. So like, you know, it's always easy to look back on a specific card that you sold and say like, hey, I could have gotten X if I would have kept it. Yeah, but it more depends on what you did with the money when you sold it. Did you do the right thing with that money and invest and purchase something else that has, equally performed it, outperformed it, or underperformed what you would have done? That's the real question. So I usually don't ever second guess myself or anyone else that chooses to sell something when they want to make a different decision or they want to put that money towards something else,
Yeah, I agree. So good. Now we have a handful of questions about PSA. So Hawks and Habs PC. Well, how about this? How about we explain why PSA is in the news? Yet again this week, PSA makes news almost every week, it seems. PSA acquired a company called Genament. And you might be wondering, what is Genament? So let's just take a couple of seconds here and watch their demo. There's their logo. Nice music. Okay, so Genament, but it sets the mood. Genament attempts to grade cards by looking at images of the cards and then assessing them. 6 different grades. Overall grade, eye appeal grade, and then surface, edges, corners, and centering. And it does all this, apparently, by just looking at an image. And this demo is sort of showing the way that the software works. So you have the card here, and then down here, the software is generating grades that the card apparently receives from Genament. Okay, so this is how it works. They're showing vintage. Let me skip ahead a little bit. Okay, I guess it's only vintage cards. I've also seen it used on modern cards as well. All right. So that's what Genament is. PSA acquired them. Do you want to put in any more of the backstory before we get to the questions?
Nope.
Okay. So the first question from Hawks and Habs PC is, I'm sure this will be a popular topic. Nat Turner's recent interviews discussing wanting to keep the door open on value grading under $20 and the PSA acquisition of Genament and what that means for the grading system at PSA. So if I can make a conceptual leap there, it seems like the two questions here are related because perhaps the use of technology of software like this will enable the return of cheaper grading. So what do you think about this?
Well, it sounds like you kind of pointed out there a little bit, but it sounds like you could potentially use the automated software to test out some of these cheaper cards where the ramifications are a little bit less risky. Obviously, you don't want to just like release it into the wild, and you obviously want to like QA it with humans for a while and make sure it's working properly. But there could be some potential there where that thing handles the cheaper cards, and then the current service levels, $300 and up that they have available, could be for humans. So that's an interesting idea, at least until it's kind of perfected, and maybe it's like a learned software where it improves over time and starts to learn different. Hopefully, it starts to learn different patterns and things that it can recognize from sets and cards that they know potentially that certain cards have more variance on the width of them. So like instead of just assuming it's trimmed, but understanding the actual variance in the widths and heights of cards. Yeah, I mean, again, like I'm kind of more of a results kind of guy. Like I'd rather just react to this when I see more how it works in practice. It's conceptually very cool, and we've talked about automated grading for a long time, and I think Nat would probably agree with this sentiment anyways, but like he wants to see it in action. I want to see the results from it and how it actually performs before I really make too much more of a comment.
Totally agree. If I wanted buy-in on, or let me phrase it differently. In order for me to accept and embrace technology like this, which I'm willing to do, I need to see empirical evidence that the software grading tool is able to, within some level of reason, accurately predict what human graders at PSA ultimately grade these cards at. If it can't do that, then what's the point? What is the purpose of it? So I would think that from the very outset, the credibility of this software device will lie in empirically proving, and I don't know what the acceptable level of variance is, but some is certainly allowed. But by proving, for example, that the software analyzed 5,000 cards, those cards were then sent in a blind submission to PSA, and the software accurately predicted the final grade 75% of the time. And when it disagreed with the final grade, it was off by half of a grade in either direction or something, or 3/10 of a grade in either direction. So I'd like to see evidence that it's actually predictive. Excuse me. But the other part of it is that and this is where it gets a little confusing, is that we're all sort of assuming, perhaps rightly, that software will be will be a better grading tool than humans, because software has the ability to be more objective than humans, although it cannot be perfectly objective because the software is still trained by humans, and the software still will intake more and more samples over time that will slightly modify and update its parameters. But the belief is that software will be more objective. So the thinking is that the software might actually influence how cards are graded. But before that were to happen, I would think it would need to be shown that the software is in fact predictive and consistent with how professional graders grade cards right now. Or else, what is the point of the software? What is it doing? If the software is giving cards 6s and 7s, and professional graders give them 9s, and the software is giving other cards 10s, and the professional graders are giving them 8s, what good does the software do? So I think we still are we're in the second inning of artificial intelligence grading. We need some credibility building to go on here, I think. Do you want to comment on that at all?
Yeah, the other thing that makes me nervous is, like, let's say that the software grading is different than the human grading. Whether we're not sure what the variance is, but it's just different. You know, it's off by 0.2, like you said, on average, on every grade, just on the whole. Now are we to assume that all previously human graded ones are invalid and people should be resending their cards in to get it re-software graded to account for this new variance and re-level set every card that exists? Or do we accept that there's a difference in, is that a software graded one versus a human graded one? Do we separate them in the pops? It's like, there's some sticky things that come up, and it's kind of like baseball probably runs into this when they come up with automated umpires. It's like a new era, right? You're like pre-shot clock era, post-shot clock. It makes for different statistics. It potentially throws off some of the pop reports. There's some sticky things there that could make it very tough. But again, I'm gonna wait to see what happens, and I want to see what you just described, which is like a scientific experiment on the results. And Nat's a smart guy. He probably didn't buy this company without doing research. So I'm assuming he did some research into them, got some demos from the team, and felt confident enough to purchase the company. So we'll see what happens.
Yeah, definitely. Like you said, though, there are pitfalls here that could happen. So I'm sure that they will delicately and gradually incorporate this device, which we can be cautiously optimistic about. One way that I imagine they could use software like this is let the software take a first crack at the card. So like, if let's say the software takes the first stab at grading 100 cards that are then put on the grader's desk, and before the grader really starts to scrutinize a card, they can look at what the software gave it. And for example, if the software says the surface here is a 4, the grader can right away be on the lookout for any surface flaws, and maybe that can save time. And it might save a few seconds here, a few seconds there, but in the aggregate, it could really add up. So I could see different ways that this could streamline and expedite grading at the margin, which actually matters quite a bit when you're talking about a backlog of 15 million cards. Cards and Candy writes, everyone loves this new AI for PSA. Do they? But in a couple of months, people will start complaining because no one will be getting 10s anymore, and we will see a lot more 7s and 8s. It's like Carvin says, be careful what you wish for. We kind of touched on this. This just makes it more explicit. Is this a real risk? Is the software just going to be tougher, and that's going to lower grades from here on out?
Hasn't PSA lowered the grades already with humans?
Yes. I don't have any systematic evidence of it, but anecdotally, we seem to hear quite a bit that people are getting much worse grades over the last few months.
The LeBron Black Shimmer from Prism got a 7.5.
Okay, good. Let's talk about that. So, M. Prosky writes in, Cardporn's post about the Pack Fresh PSA 7.5 LeBron Black Shimmer 1 of 1 from 20 Prism. Thoughts? So let me pull it up while we talk about it. This card has been very popular in the hobby. Like this particular Black Shimmer copy, which if I remember correctly came from Burbank Sports Cards. They pulled it in shop. Okay, so here's the card, right? The Black Shimmer 1 of 1, 2020 Prism. LeBron.
Centering's wow.
Yeah, the centering top to bottom, or I suppose from this point of view, left to right, is off. The card received a grade of 7.5, and some of the discussion surrounding this was, is this really acceptable that a Pack Fresh card would get a 7.5? So what do we think about this?
Yeah, are we more mad at PSA for giving it that grade, or Panini for having a Pack Fresh card get that grade?
Yeah, I mean, things can happen too in between the pack and the grading process as well.
Sure. Yeah, I'm guessing there's some sort of like indent on the back or something, some sort of like fingernail dent or giant like print line or something. And I don't know, I'd have to look the card over before I make a judgment. I just kind of have to assume there's something wrong with it. It didn't even get an 8, so it's definitely something wrong with it.
Yeah, right. This actually could be a number of things too. It might have some flaws. PSA might be more strict with grading lately. It might be both. It might actually be both things happening. Right?
That's like mega strict. If it's Pack Fresh and they give it a 7.5, I don't know. I'm not like a giant PSA supporter, but I feel it's definitely something wrong with it. I don't think anyone in there would intentionally give it a 7.5 just to be strict. I mean, do they really want that big of a card in a 7.5? I would think that they're just being objective here.
Yeah. I mean, do you prefer a stricter PSA? Like, let's say there's two different worlds. World A is the old world, or our perception of it, where anything Prism is going to be a 9 or a 10 95% of the time. And so do we like that world better, where all Prism is a 9 or a 10, basically, even if the centering's off, even if there's some scratches on the back? Or do we like world B better, where Prism, or where PSA is very strict, every flaw is taken seriously, including off centering, and cards get very precise but very accurate grades? And there's not nearly, and so now maybe only 50% of cards are going to be 9s or 10s. Which world do you like better, and why?
Well, I like when the grades are higher when they're my cards, and when they're lower when they're other people's cards. I don't know. I don't really have a good answer, to be honest. I'm not sure. Like, I'm in that group of people where it's like, I want 10s. Like, I like 10s. Who doesn't like a perfect gem mint card? That's kind of the point. But I also don't want every card to have a 10 where they're meaningless, so it's kind of an odd balance there. It's a tough question.
It is. It really is. I also wonder if maybe there's an intentional move by PSA to sort of stratify the grades that are given out to different cards and to create more of a standard distribution, so that the average grade is now a 7.5, let's say, instead of a 9, so that there's much more variance and much more nuance separating and stratifying the graded population of a card. I wonder if something like that is happening right now intentionally. And then we start to see pop reports that look more like vintage pop reports or 90s Grail pop reports, where, you know, a 4, a 5, a 6, a 7 is a totally acceptable grade. It's considered pretty good condition for those cards.
I have a funny story that kind of relates, but like I don't remember what the company was, but they asked me to review them on like a 0 to 10 scale. You know how you always review companies and they ask you through email or whatever. And
Yes.
I gave him an 8 out of 10, and I'm like, 8's good, man. You guys are above average. I thought it was fine. And like one of their higher ups like called me and they're like, what was wrong with your service, sir? Should I be concerned about the person who helped you? And I was like, what are you talking about? They're like, you gave us an 8. We look for 10s. And I was like, I mean, I didn't give you like a 1. Should you really be concerned? An 8's pretty good. And they were like, no, sir, we look only 10s, or else we flag it.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. You know, I don't know that I want to live in a world where it's 10 or bust. Like, why don't you just ask me if it was good or bad then?
Yeah. I know, man. That's funny. All right. Midwest Vintage Card says, I was reading PSA's press release about the AI grading, and something stood out. Quote, it will also provide unique card identification or card fingerprinting by identifying the exact card in order to track provenance and resubmissions. Is this maybe a way to get a better population report? For example, if there's a resubmission where a card has been cracked out and resubbed, then they can adjust the pop report accordingly, having better population count accuracy. What do you think about that?
Yeah, that's a fantastic side effect, because you can prevent trimming and patch swapping as well through that, right? If it's been graded and you've fingerprinted it and then it comes back to you raw and it's the same card but it looks different, you know, obviously you could stop that. That's really good. That's pretty much an only positive outcome there. There's nothing bad there. Yeah, preventing cracking. I've actually heard that if there's been a new grade, not grade, but like I forget what PSA calls it, but where they send it back to you and they're like, nope, we've graded this before. Sorry. So like, you know, you're preventing people from cracking and sending in.
Yeah, and I don't know if I love that personally, just because I think the grading companies should have the humility to make the allowance for the possibility that the grade of the card on the first go round may have not been good.
Well, they have a review process.
Yeah, they do. They do, but there also is a concern that there's bias there, that that they will be biased by seeing that, hey, the card is an 8, whereas they might be able to more objectively review the card if it's outside of any slab. But that's a pretty small concern, I think.
I think all of this stuff makes me think the party's over, guys. Like, grading is going to turn into this systematic way for the grading companies to profit and for the collectors to just use it as a means of grading their cards, and no longer going to be a way to flip cards anymore.
Yeah, which probably is not a bad thing in the long term. Yeah, okay. Last question on PSA. Mr. LAGN says, now that PSA will scan and use artificial intelligence like HGA does, will they get slightly more credibility? And this is a very tricky question, because who's the they? Does PSA get more credibility, or does HGA get more credibility? I have to think that the they is referring to, does HGA get more credibility now that PSA is doing this? What do you think?
Yeah, credibility, like they're copying them, because we've all been talking about this. It's not like a new concept that HGA invented.
Yeah, and it's not entirely clear. I think we might, as we noted earlier in the episode, we're very optimistic in this hobby. We might be overly optimistic about what AI actually is and isn't.
It's going to be perfect.
Yeah.
Well, it's like any other software that you encounter in your life. It's not great when you first use it, and then eventually it gets better. Even Card Letter,
Mm,
like it wasn't the best when I first launched it. It was literally like in beta, and we told you it's gonna have some problems, and now it's gotten better and better and better. It's gotten smarter. We've gotten smarter. Our users are telling us what they don't like about it, and so we've fixed it. So like it's this is gonna be the same thing. It's not perfect, so it's gonna have to be improved over time.
yeah. Rip that wax. Our previous guest brings up how much will human graded tens depreciate, and I think that is a real concern that
Mm-hmm.
that people are thinking about is
Yeah,
post we don't know how much software is actually being used to grade cards, but there certainly could. It's conceivable that there will become a time when there's going to be, the true gem that passed the more rigorous standard that now is being used when now the software is incorporated, and then the early 10, the pre software 10 that might actually be a 10 or it might not be.
well,
Um,
here's another thought.
yeah.
It could appreciate the value because now there's going to be less of them.
That's true. And also, looking at some of the Prism PSA 10s that have come out over the last few years, some of those have 70-30 centering and are not
Yeah,
great 10s. And they all seem to pretty much trade at the same price, like
that's
commodities.
correct.
So I don't
Yep,
know if there's a
correct.
ton to worry about there.
No, people even like as you started talking about that, I'm like, God, I hope it does so I can go buy some old pens.
And there's the upside.
Therefore, it will not because I just said that thing out loud. Like that's how efficient the market can get at a certain point where like someone's thinking they want it to go down so they can get it cheaper. That means it's not going down.
True. Although I do look forward very much to the inevitable posts about here's my AI 10. So you're gonna have to take the comps and add 20% if you want my AI.
AI one of one pen. Yeah.
That will
I
be an
already hate
eBay
that person.
listing.
I already hate those people. I pre-hate them.
All right. Nate B. Hoops says, you guys usually focus heavily on modern cards, which I'll define as 80s and more recent. Can you share some of your thoughts on collecting vintage basketball and baseball, 70s and older? Why have you chosen to, or why not? Pros and cons? Thoughts on vintage grails? I find it
Yeah.
hard to find quality vintage content and analysis and would love to hear some of your current takes. And that is true.
Yeah.
There is not a lot of good content about vintage out there.
Yeah. Um, yeah. I mean, it's one thing is that, yourself and me and myself, we don't try to talk about things we don't know about. That's why, there's not a lot of hockey and baseball content and stuff because we don't want to speak on things we're not really educated on. So same with vintage, like we just don't know a ton about it. And so that's probably why also you're not getting a lot of content because the people who do collect vintage and have a lot of knowledge, they just aren't creating content. They're not, whether they just don't like creating content or they don't, or whatever reason, that's just kind of the reality. I have a great appreciation for it. And I greatly respect the foundation that vintage has built for us, and it's one of the things that I point to when I want to show someone the hobby. It's like, hey, we've had cards for decades, over a century. You can go back and look at these really old cards and feel better about the market knowing that this isn't just like a new thing that popped up, top shot, and it's got some actual history to it. And some of those cards are really cool looking cards, right? Like they're very like simplistic and elegant in the way they look, and they're not you could even I bet you a lot of people that collect vintage would point to modern and say that modern's kind of tacky. It's overdone, there's too many colors, there's too much going on. What happened to sort of like this simple let me look at the Wilt Fleer 1961 and just enjoy the simplicity of the card and let the card speak for itself and not have to get bogged down in the gold refractors and the pink ice and all this stuff and just enjoy the card for itself. So I like that simplicity of vintage, and I think it's very an underrated aspect of it. I like vintage. I think it's cool. You know, I don't have any like emotional connection to it because I didn't watch these players, I think is the biggest thing. And that's kind of maybe the reason you don't see a lot of vintage content is these guys, you know, are obviously aren't active in playing. So we can't like see them. They're not, you know, they're not actively in our viewpoint. So that's probably one reason, but I don't know if I'm just kind of rambling at this point, throwing out a bunch of random stuff, but definitely appreciate vintage. And I wish there was more content because I think it would be really cool.
Yeah, I agree. There's certainly in a hobby content landscape that is pretty full these days, there is a void to create analytical, modern, forward-thinking, you know, hobby style content about vintage that could treat vintage, the investment properties of vintage, as well as the collectability properties of vintage. And I agree completely that there is it's good to have an appreciation for vintage. Vintage is wonderfully simple compared to some of the complexity of modern sets. And
I bet you like vintage for card ladder.
yes, that's exactly what I'm thinking of. And vintage is nice because it's precedent. So like in one of the Michael Jordan chats this week, one of the guys was asking, he was saying, well, you know, is Michael Jordan going to be collectible in 20 years? You know, when like literally nobody in their 20s and 30s will have watched him play. And I was like, well, I don't know. Are people still buying Mickey Mantle cards? Are people still buying Willie Mays? Because that's your precedent. And people will say, well, there's actually lots of more of Michael Jordan cards than there are of Willie Mays or Mickey Mantle cards, which is true. But the scope of relevance Michael Jordan cards that are the real items that are sought after by collectors over the long haul, probably in the aggregate are not so different total pop count wise from, say, all of the Mickey Mantle playing years tops issues, of which there are tens and tens and tens of thousands across all the different grades. So I actually think it is maybe a better comparison than it seems to be at first. And vintage is a nice indicator of maybe what we can expect, the stuff that we collect to do over the next long term, you know, 20, 30, 50, 70 years from now type of thing.
Yeah, for sure, man. I need some time for my last thing.
Yes, well, that's the next question. So Drake's PC writes, LeBron's on-court accomplishments currently far outweigh any of the negativity created by his comments made on social issues and injustices. But when his playing days are over, are you concerned that these types of things, assuming that they continue, may potentially have a negative effect on him in the hobby?
Oh. Yeah, I mean, I've been thinking about this a lot today. It's obviously like it's a tough topic to approach because there's a lot of like political and emotional things that go into it. It's a very hot topic. It's very polarizing. People are, you know, pissed at him or they're defending him or whatever the case may be. And it's very black and white and very divisive and 50-50. And, you know, it kind of like reflects our current political climate where you're either left or you're right, and you're either good or evil depending on which side of it you're on. So that's what one of the things I really dislike about modern politics is it's very divisive and kind of separates people. And this is like an actual scientific study that it's really bad for society, and there's documentaries on it and stuff. So I don't want to go too far into that, but I did see the tweet and I didn't like it. I thought it was very threatening and very violence inducing, and I don't like that because I think, you know, the overall thing that LeBron is going for is to connect people and bring them together and, you know, create harmony and love over hate and divisiveness, and this tweet was the opposite of that. And I think that's probably why he deleted it. He realized, it was in bad taste, and it was very threatening. It was basically like you should go attack, like almost like giving people a right to go attack police officers, which is obviously, I would hope, is obviously not what he wanted to portray. And he was probably more emotional and frustrated at just kind of another news bit about someone dying, and it's just like yet another thing where his anger and frustration is building up to where he did something like this and made a mistake. And I don't want to speak for him. I'd like to see him apologize for it a little bit more, just because if his goal is to not create violence and divisiveness, then he shouldn't be tweeting stuff like that. So that's the first thing. I'm not going to defend him on that tweet. I completely disagree with it. The next thing is, I like to look at the total body of work of a human and a person and try to give them the full respect that they deserve in terms of their life. And so for LeBron, for me, he's built up a ton of credibility with me, and he's got a lot of things that he's done very well in his life, and I feel like I can feel confident in saying he's a good person based on his track record of what I've seen. And he's built schools, he's donated his time, his money to these communities, and he's very heavily involved in trying to better the lives of people around him, which I think should be the primary goal for politics and for everything, for society. It's like, are we trying to improve the health, wellness, happiness, well-being of people around us and ourselves and our families? And so I feel confident in saying he has that, and he is a good person, and that's something he strives for. He made a mistake here, and I guess the heart of the question is like, let's assume the heart of the question is taking it positive, that I know he's a good person, but he keeps screwing up on Twitter and doing stupid things. Should I be worried about my investments because he might say something stupid in the future and continue to do so? And I'll say this: if that's your concern, you should sell all your LeBron cards right now, because I guarantee you he's going to keep saying things. And we've seen it over and over that he wants to be an activist, he wants to be involved, he wants to have his voice heard, and he wants to affect change in the world outside of basketball. And hopefully most of that change is positive. Some of it won't be, like this instance. Some of it's going to be negative, and he's going to have to own that, and he's going to have to move on and figure out how to be a better person going forward. So, if that's your concern, you should probably sell. And also, it kind of makes me mad that, we're turning this into, how does his political view affect my own personal finances, when the actual question should be, what do I think of him as a person, and do I want to, associate myself with someone and put my money into something if I don't agree with them, or I do agree with them? If I don't agree with them, then I'm not going to buy anything from that person. I'm not going to support them. As opposed to, I like him, but I wish he would just shut up and dribble so that I can make more money. LeBron and Jordan have probably like directly influenced and impacted the most like financial gain from the largest group of humans in like human history. That's like a total guess, but like just think of all the people that LeBron and Jordan have directly impacted financially through the city of Akron, or the Cavs team, and all the players, all the teams involved, all the people involved with the sports cards. Obviously people have gotten rich off of him. And that's kind of like this. I've always thought that was the sentiment behind shut up and dribble, was like, yeah, you just, reduce the risk on my financial risk towards you, and just like be quiet and just go play, because you're making me so much money. All I want you to do is just play. And he's pushing back against that, and I respect that. And so I continue to support him, obviously through my collecting, and I still like him as a person. Like I said, his whole body of work still shows to me that he's a good person. So if you don't like him, I totally understand it. We don't have to agree. You may think he's a terrible person. I understand that. So don't buy his cards. Sell what you have, and then we can just kind of move on. But it kind of bothers me to hear the sentiment of like, I like him, but he's losing me money, so I don't like him now. It's that kind of bothers me. So I don't like the censorship and kind of the like, you know, I want him to keep playing because he's making me money and I like him, but I just don't want him to talk. I don't want him to speak his mind. I want him to be quiet. That's the danger territory for me. You know, we can't have that. We still need like people expressing their opinions and having open dialogue. I'm saying a ton, so just step in. That was kind of my big rant for the night. I was nervous about it, but Chris, why don't you step in and say some stuff?
Oh, it was a great rant. It was a great rant. To this always is a very awkward question. How does this affect my collection, or how does this affect the market or the collectability of a player? As you know, and collecting is actually something really interesting. This actually prods into what really is collecting and what should our relationship be to the athletes that we collect, and how is it different, our relationship to athletes versus our relationship to collecting athletes. How are those different things? These are topics that cannot fully be even close to fleshed out in this setting, nor should they be. They should be thought about a lot more deeply. I don't think anybody has really done scholarship on anything like that. So it's a topic that will be left open. But I can say this about the collectability of LeBron. From the neutral point of view of just, does it make him more or less collectible that he participates in activism, that he speaks out about topics, that he might from time to time send a tweet that's controversial? And the answer to that has to be, if it was going to, it surely would have already done so by now. This has been happening, and we all know and accept and have formed opinions about LeBron long ago. The thing that would be worrisome is if a tweet came out tomorrow that said, I will be, I don't know, Donald Trump's running mate in 2024. Then you have to say, whoa, we've had a complete 180 here. This is unexpected. What does this mean for who this person is, their legacy, their understanding? But LeBron taking an activist stance, speaking out, doing so in a controversial or an edgy way, is certainly on brand. And in fact, you might even argue it keeps things more interesting, and it's provocative, and it's worth talking about, and people care about it. And it's just an already built-in part of collecting LeBron. And then I also want to say that there is nobody who can avoid this. There is not a winning scenario where when an athlete or a public figure of any sort weighs in on a topic that has people on both sides, which almost all political ones do, there's never going to be a way to please everybody. And in fact, you know, people point to Jordan as being somebody who was admirably restrained in commenting on topics. Well, first of all, think about his most well-known quip from the 90s, which was that Republicans buy shoes too. Well, you know, that's an interesting comment. There's a lot of different ways to go with it. But if you really wanted to take the least charitable point of view of that, you would say, well, what's Jordan really saying there? What he's saying is that I don't agree with Republicans necessarily, but I'll take their money. And the way that I get their money is by being quiet and not standing up and speaking about and having an opinion on things that I otherwise would have an opinion on. And so in other words, what he's saying is I value, you know, my brand and my commerce more than speaking out about things. Mm-hmm. And so then we decide, is that a value that we associate with or not? And there's probably a lot of people who don't like that. So even trying to opt out of the discussion isn't really opting out. It's still de facto picking a side. So I guess really the only outcome anytime that you get into a topic like this, any political topic, is that hopefully you just don't piss off everybody, but that you only piss off half. I think that's the goal. Thank you. That's the goal here. Just only piss off half, and then you've actually done the best you can do.
Yeah, and some people might actually say that I didn't go far enough in supporting LeBron right of his tweet, and so like I'm going to lose that. I'm going to lose no matter what I say, basically, like, to your point. But I mean, I did know what his intention was with the tweet just because I know his stance on it. I know what he meant. He probably meant, you know, you're going to get the same punishment that this other police officer did for what you did, and that's what he meant. The problem is, you know, the what it looks like could be construed as worse, and that's what is like, oh, this could actually be seen as something that is a reason for someone to incite violence, which is the problem I had with it. But again, like, you know, I'm not gonna change my whole take on a person based on one emotional tweet. You know, it's like I need to look at their full body work, and that's kind of the way we treat the hobby too, right, Chris? Like we're not looking at the sales from the last week where things have plummeted. We're kind of okay. Let's like step back. Let's look at 1 year of data. Let's look at 5 years of data, and then make the decision. You know, where do we think the value is in this thing? And so, you know, definitely don't judge people by one mistake, and I try to look at their whole picture. So I don't know. My last comment was just kind of like, I feel like as humans, we all still generally want the same thing. Like I said earlier, we all want people around us. We want our immediate families. We want ourselves to be happy, healthy, and have general overall good well-being. And so, like, if we just lead in with that, I think things will be a lot better than they are. And just remember that everyone wants people to be happy. Everyone wants themselves and other people to be happy. And this whole like desire to disagree with someone and be on the other side and fight and be right and be wrong is it's kind of like the landscape of the current internet world, and it's frustrating. But I like to think most people are still good, you know, somewhere in there, especially when they're interacting in person.
Definitely. Okay. Interesting topic. Always never at a loss of interesting topics. So that wraps up hour one. Guys, we're going to come back with hour two. We have a very, very special guest for hour two that I'm very excited to bring on. So we, as usual, we're going to terminate hour one right now. I'm going to post it to Instagram. We will be back in about 2 minutes with hour two, and we'll be bringing on our guest. So I will see everybody, Josh and I and our guest will see everybody in 120 seconds. Waiting for Josh, and then I will bring in our guest as well. There he is, and let's bring in our guest for hour two. What are we drinking tonight, by the way?
Truly.
Nice.
What's up?
What up?
There he is, the man who needs no introduction in this hobby or hobbies adjacent, but it is the man himself, Josh Fluber, notorious founder of StockX. How are you, man?
I am unbelievable. I'm just happy to find someone to hang out with me at 1 a.m. And talk. I go to bed so late these days I go to bed at like 5 a.m. these days. It's like I'm on a whole nother so this is like right in the middle of my workday. So this is awesome. Like 3 of us, the only people up. So that's great.
You're wide awake, dude. I can tell. No, when Chris like proposed this, I was thinking, oh, it's the East Coast. It might be late. And I'm like, nah, Luber will be up. He's always working late.
1,000%. Yeah, for sure.
Love it.
How the first hour guy caught the very end. Seems like you got guys pretty heavy the last couple of minutes there.
Heaviest it's ever been, right, Josh? I'd say.
I mean, I've been like building up all day for this rant, but you know, I feel like I had to say something about it.
Yeah.
Hey, man. You know, speak your mind. It's all good.
Yeah. Josh, I am very anxious to ask you about the new content that you're making hobby-wise. You and Kevin have the show going, ESPN branded. Can we talk about it a little bit? Can you tell us a little bit about it?
Yeah, for sure. So ESPN's this new network. They do a lot of sports on TV.
Oh, that one. Got it.
Yeah. You know, honestly, this is as much of a personal, relationship as anything. Kevin started buying shoes on StockX like the first week we launched the business way back when. And he's from Philly and I'm from Philly. And, you know, he had reached out and supported us from very, very beginning. We did a bunch of content with him early on at StockX. And then about a year and change ago, he saw me getting back into cards and posting about it, talking about it, and hit me up. And he's like, hey, I want to get back in. Can, you know, help me get up to speed. and so I looped him in with other people I knew, and so we've just been like you have your group of friends that you talk cards with all the time, and so when Kevin was deep enough into it where he had dropped popping like a PSA 10 enough on SportsCenter, he went to the powers that be at ESPN and was like, hey, I want to do a show. He didn't even tell me. He's like, I want to do a show and I have the guy I want to do it with. And then he called me. He's like, they said they're down. Come do this with me. I was like, hell yeah. I was like, let's roll. So we haven't come up with a name for the show yet. So by the way, if you guys have any names, but it's a regular internet show. It'll be once a week once we get a little more just in the rhythm of production schedules and all that. They're just trying to work it out of the kind of semi bureaucracy of ESPN of just signing as producers and all the different stuff. I just show up and talk cards. Like I get to do the easy part, but it was all Kevin of like, just being back into cards and caring about it and then pushing the people to ESPN to do it. And so it'll be great to have the continued support of ESPN to do this. And I get to show up and talk cards with him. So it's pretty cool.
Can you guys see the chat right now or not? I can't see it on my screen because my Instagram is terrible. Can you guys see a chat though?
I can.
Yes?
Yeah.
Okay, so maybe we can ask the chat. We have a pretty heady chat, maybe too clever for their own good. Yeah. But we could ask our chat to throw out some titles potentially for the show.
There you go. I have one.
Yeah. Hey man, we're open to suggestion. Here's the thing is I want to keep it tied to ESPN somehow because there's so much content out there. And every day someone else with an iPhone comes out and put out a podcast or something that I just feel like it'll it's a good way to kind of just distinguish us. So not that it's going to be called ESPN's trading card show or something, but I don't know if there's some like hook into ESPN. I think that would be good, but so
Card Center.
Yeah, Card Center.
What was that?
Card Center. Sports Center. Card Center.
Yeah.
You should call it Card Ladder.
Card Ladder.
That'd be really tight, and that would be really good for me.
Yeah. Well, if you guys have noticed, we've multiple weeks now in a row, we've been referencing Card Ladder data and make sure that it's cited accordingly on all graphics and everything else. So we appreciate that. Oh man,
that's amazing.
Last show, we pivoted on the topic like 10 minutes before we started filming. And then Kevin and myself and the producer sat there looking up on Card Ladder all the prices and pop reports, like literally last second. Be like, all right, you check Mahomes and Allen, you check Lamar, and da-da-da. And we sat there and went through it all on Card Ladder, like real time, as quick as can be, got it all done, and then started filming. So, I mean, it's a completely unbiased and plug for Card Ladder, but I mean, it's exactly what happened.
That's terrific. Okay, so look, I can see the chat again. So so here's some of the suggestions. We've got Card Porn chimes in with pumpers and dumpers. He said it needs to be ESPN branded, guys. Cowboy Break says ESPN lubed up. Mr. LAGN says Card Show. Investicard 2 Electric Bugaloo. Ooh, okay.
Well, you're going to want to stop reading.
Pauline Burners. Card Center, another vote for Card Center. Stock Next, that's kind of clever. From Donovan, what's up, Donovan? Sports Slab Center, Mickey's Card House. Okay, well, plenty of things.
I like that one.
Yeah, I knew you would like that one. Plenty to work with there. How can people watch the show, Josh? If they
which one does Christine like?
She likes Mickey's Card House.
Yeah,
because
like
the Disney.
Yeah. So the
it's
one that I like
for me.
or Disney, yeah. So the one that I like the best so far, which no one will get. So Kevin and I are both from Philadelphia, and so a friend of mine suggested the Crop Report, right? Which is from Trading Places, right? Which is which is a very obscure reference, but I kind of like the Crop Report. But what were you asking? How many people watch the show?
How can people go and catch up on previous episodes? I know you post clips.
Oh, yeah. It's everything's posted on the ESPN's YouTube channel. And yeah.
Awesome.
I have some questions.
Bring it.
It's been burning in me. I just got to know, what has made you, I don't want to say pivot because I'm sure you still are in the shoe game, but what about cards kind of has you so, I'll use the word excited because I know you pretty well and I know you're excited about cards. What is it about cards that's kind of made you make this pivot?
Yeah. Well, I have the same stories every other 43-year-old, right? Like, and on both sneakers and cards, right? Because when I was 12, the only two things that mattered in my whole life were sneakers and baseball cards. And ironically, at the time, I couldn't really afford many sneakers, right? So I had way more cards than I did sneakers. And it just so happened that I created a business in sneakers first. But I think this gets to some of the content that you guys have been putting out there. I was lucky that StockX and the viewpoint I had at StockX gave me an early viewpoint into what was going on in trading cards, right? So for me, it was like the end of 2018 that I started to see trading cards moving as a potential vertical to go to StockX and got me there. So like on a personal level, trading cards have been as important to me as sneakers my whole life. It just so happened that I kept collecting sneakers the whole time, or my sneaker collection went like this slowly over time. My trading card collection went like this, right? Like everyone else's. Frankly, I kind of wish it was the inverse. The portfolio value would be a whole lot more if it had been the inverse. But on a personal level, it was always there, and I was just lucky that I got back into it a little bit ahead of time because at StockX we were always looking for what other products would go on the site. But man, as soon as we made that decision, end of like 2018 going into 2019, and then the summer of 2019 when I replaced myself as CEO of StockX, we brought in a professional CEO. Then I was spending all my time on trading cards, and like I was like loving it. I was like deep in, and stuff. So, and on both personal buying and for StockX, and that's what led to me leaving StockX to create businesses in trading cards, because as successful StockX has been, and there's still a long way to go. I mean, the IPO is targeted for towards the end of this year, and there's decades of business left there. The exciting part is those first couple of years. The exciting part is building something from scratch. And, it took me a really long time to come to grips with, hey, just because I created the business doesn't mean I have to stay here. And it took about almost a year post, CEO transfer to like come to that. And then once that happened, it was like, oh man, like the world's your oyster. And there was so much going on in trading cards, and it was so easy to walk away and say, hey, I want to like do stuff in trading cards. And there's a bunch of stuff going on, some of which, I've already talked about. But shit, if all I was doing would be buying and selling cards for myself, I couldn't be happier than, than being in StockX and sitting through budget meetings and making decks to get 2% more budget to make something 4% more efficient. Like, fuck that. Like, I want to build stuff, So this is just, honestly, like, all of it is a dream come true. I'm so lucky that I get to build businesses in sneakers and trading cards. Like, it's amazing. It really, really is.
That's amazing, dude. I love your just how real you are, because I think we can all just sense just how, like, you're right, man. Fucking nobody wants to be in meetings. Chris and I hate it just as much as the next guy. And my next question is, I've really like outwardly admired how you approach the hobby, and I'll explain what I mean. Like there's a lot of guys, especially in guys that are kind of in the public a little bit, who will use their platform to try to like inflate what they're buying, and they'll talk about what they're buying. They'll get overly excited. You have taken a little bit different approach where you're kind of like privately buying it, and it seems like you're doing that because, I'm just guessing, but you're having more fun with it, kind of like keeping it to yourself. Can you talk about that strategy for yourself and maybe how you think it's paid off for you more in the long run?
Well, there's a couple of parts of that. So if you're buying anything that has any level of scarcity, right, and you think you're onto something, I don't want anybody to know about that, right? Because first of all, it's just going to cause me to have to pay more, or I'm going to miss out on cards, right? It is, and if I'm wrong, I'm wrong, but it's pretty hard to be that wrong right now on something, so I don't really want people to know if I think that there's something that's a deal out there, or that I might be onto something. And the flip side is, if I pay a ridiculous amount of money for a card, which I tend to do sometimes, frankly, like, I don't really want to know. I don't want people to know that I just spent whatever, like, because partly it's a little bit embarrassing, but it's also like, I here's the thing is I know Rob Go, and this isn't to talk shit about him, but I would never in a million years have done what he did and gone out and tell the world I bought that card. Right. It was just, I wouldn't want anyone to know that. And like, it kind of fucked everyone else that wanted to buy a mantle. Like, if you were out there trying to like wanted to buy a mantle, like the day after that, and you're screwed. Like, and since then, right? So it's a combination of all of that. And then depending on what it is that I'm buying, I'll like slowly start to fill in people, right? Like I have one guy who I'm really, really close with, and we'll often buy deals together, or we'll look at stuff together. And then, it's kind of like the outward like circle of friends and stuff like that. But once I start getting priced out of stuff, then I'm more than happy to sort of tell the world what I've been buying and just talk about it. But I've been pretty open that non-sport cards in general, I think are massively undervalued, just because there's just not that much out of, like, the scarcity of non-sport cards compared to sport cards is so disproportionate. And and I wasn't saying anything about it when I was buying it, like towards the, like, in August, September last year. But now, like, there's enough people are on it, and it's fine. Jimi Hendrix and Bob Marley and Bob Dylan and Led Zeppelin and all that stuff, which is like, it's hardly a secret. But man, when I first started buying that stuff, like, nobody was buying that. It was dirt cheap. And then now I'm getting priced out of all the auctions anyway. So
Yeah, there's been a couple private deals that I was in the middle of where you were involved, and I was like, dude, this guy knows what he's doing over here. I'm gonna help him get this deal, because this guy knows what he's doing. He's buying stuff that I have. This is smart.
well, that's not a bad strategy at all. Just see what you guys are buying, and just try to ride your coattails.
Yeah, we try to hide that as much as we can. Same way as you. Like, we don't want to have to.
Well, Chris knows. I won't blow up the spot even more, but I found out Chris had a card that I really wanted, and I was like, hey, I'm just going to text you every day for the next 6 months until you sell it to me. And eventually I felt bad, and I stopped texting him.
Yeah, because Christina made him stop.
Eventually I stopped, but I did text him. I was probably a good 30 or 40 texts before I finally let up, and I was like, okay. I was like, all right. So
No, that's how true collector rolls, man. That's how
it's
true
like,
collector rolls.
you gotta bug them, but you don't. You gotta like find that line of.
Yeah. Every time I would add like one more card to the deal, it was like a picture of 4 cards and 5 cards and 6 cards. Then there was like a case in there with the 6 cards. Yeah.
It did get enticing, Josh. I will say that.
I would imagine, like, the math definitely made sense.
It did. There's lots of things. You mentioned hobby businesses a couple of times. Can you talk about it at all, or no? Or is that close to the chest, similar to the grail hunting?
Yeah, no, I mean, so some of them, right? So you guys may have also seen that I've been doing a regular Instagram live. I didn't do it tonight with Jason Concepcion, previously of The Ringer, and now with Crooked Media. So, on the content front, both of those things, we'll continue to push forward with Kevin at ESPN and with Jason of what we can do there. I just enjoy that stuff. On the business side, I think a lot of people know that I've created a, call it like a trading card alternative asset management company, where we have like trading card funds and raise money to buy cards. That was purely a function of, one, I just couldn't buy any more cards physically. Like, at some point, you just, like, doesn't matter how much money you have, you just got to stop buying cards, at least at that level. And then 2, so many people were asking me to buy cards. And this was a big part of the transition to leave StockX and go do this, because the similarity between sneakers in 2013, 2014 and trading cards right now, I mean, it's almost identical. It's the same people, it's the same generation, it's the same supply and demand construct.
Mm-hmm.
It's all of us. It's just people coming back in to drive the demand up against a fixed supply. Michael Jordan at the center of both industries. You've all of this. And so in 2013, I'd get hit up a half a dozen times a week saying, hey man, can you help me find those Jordans we used to wear in high school? And now it was, hey man, can you help me find Jordan rookies? Right? So it was this combination of all these people asking for help buying cards. And I actually bought, there's probably like 3 or 4 people where they said, hey, let me just give you 50 grand. Let me give you 100 grand. Can you just buy me a collection? And, and I did that for like 3 or 4 people just because they were friends and helped them out. And it was right before the big run up in like August of last year. So I did this, all 3 of them, like in the matter of like 6 weeks have like tripled their money. Right. So then there's like 12 people, 15 people were hitting me. And the conversation goes from, hey, can I give you 50 grand and buy me a collection, to, hey, can I give you 50 grand and buy a collection? But, you know, I don't really want to like hold it. Could you like hold it for me and then sell it for me later? And I'm like, no. Like, what? And then I was like, well, hold on. I was like, there's a pretty like obvious business there. So it's a really simple business, but it gives the legal regulatory framework to be able to do a lot of other things as it grows. And it's not the primary business that I am still keeping close to the vest, and we'll talk about soon. But all these things get to the highest level point where trading cards are true investable assets. And I don't need to even begin to explain that to you guys of why that's the case. But because of that, there's so many business opportunities that are on the table, right? Every business model, every business opportunity, every business partner it's already e-commerce. It already is the center of culture. Now it's also finance, and it's also gambling, right? So every business in all 4 of those business industries is on the table. So, you know, a lot of these things we'll see will come together. But, you know, to me, there's so much opportunity in the space. And, but I will say that I am not creating a data and analytics price guide. And I am not going after that part of the market. I feel like that part is very well covered, and it's good for those people in the space who will continue to cite their data on SportsCenter.
Just tell the people it's because you know that you couldn't beat us at it.
I have too much to do at 4 a.m. Not like Chris is up here cleaning data like I was a decade ago.
That's the right answer. He has better things to do at 4 a.m. I think that's the correct answer.
I went through my 18 months of cleaning data at 4 a.m. Like I did that, man. Like I've been there, you know, and it's got to be done. And I appreciate it. Hey, so let me ask you guys something on that topic. So and I don't know the answer to this. Have you guys explored Alt's pricing mechanism? Can you, like, I don't know, like, can you talk about the distinction between like Card Ladder and Alt? And because they're obviously promoting that they're going to be a better, you know, price guide and stuff like that. And I haven't gotten into it. I don't know if you have a point of view on that yet.
I haven't really heard much about them. I know that somebody associated with the company bought some big cards, and there's like a fund involved or something like that. But pricing, it's not really a subjective thing, in my opinion. You have comps. You have a lot of different data sources that you can mine to get comps from. But, you know, having hard data matters. So to the extent that there's models or, you know, things like that, they need to be transparent. And this is just for the good of the hobby. They need to be transparent. They need to be historically grounded. They need to be empirically verifiable. So predictions should be made in advance, and then they should be analyzed. But in the sports card market, we have a lot of hard data out there. The hard part isn't thinking what a price is. The hard part is tracking the data, vetting the data, and then aggregating it in a way that makes sense. And there's no shortcut to it. You got to do the work. Anybody who wants to do the work and, you know, knows the hobby, they're going to be able to assemble a great data set. But short of that, I just don't think there's really a shortcut to data in this industry.
Yeah, no, I mean, I agree with that as well. So it'll be interesting. Like I said, you guys have a pretty good foothold in that corner. So it's interesting when someone else comes out. It seems like they're trying to do a little bit of everything. So I don't know what they'll end up being. But, you know, I think if for sure it's good when you have people like Alexis Ohanian who, you know, care about the sport and the hobby and talking about it, you know, everywhere. And so stuff like that is good. But I don't know enough about the business and trying to figure it out. So I don't know if you guys did.
Yeah, me neither. But you said something interesting about trying to do a little bit of everything. When an industry is expanding, that's the time to specialize, in my opinion, rather than generalize. And I think we see that when new companies pop up, the ones that master one domain are the ones that add the most value, and leave other domains to people who have already mastered them. So do we really need 10 more marketplaces next week? Do we really need 10 more grading companies? Maybe. But then again, maybe there's other ways to add value that really speak to needs that aren't being served rather than ones that already are. That's just a business philosophy that I have.
Well, I'll tell you, you hit on something, which is, I mean, the marketplace point is, and couldn't be more true. And in fact, the very nature of success in marketplace is about liquidity. And so every time there's another marketplace that launches, you're now splitting more liquidity against eBay, and it makes eBay that much stronger. And so I don't know how that's going to shake out. And I'm not going after marketplace. I mean, I've been there, done that at StockX, but I know that corner of the world really well. And I don't know if any of the people out there have the right mousetrap yet, but even if they do, everyone is so fragmented. And I'm going to guess that, with PWCC's announcement about whatever their new auction house is, that they're going to move in that direction, that Golden and PSA are going to move in that direction. So like, I bet you we have 5 more marketplaces before the end of this year. And frankly, like that's bad for everybody. Like, and then it's just, so we'll see how that goes. And well, it just makes that much more work for you guys cleaning data at 4 a.m. So I don't envy you on that side, but it's not good for the hobby.
Chris bitches to me about that at least once a day. Like, yeah, there's another fucking marketplace. Damn it.
Yeah. No, I know exactly that feeling.
I've never known. I mean, I had no idea how many auction houses are out there. Let me just say that. And they're ending all the time, and big cards are ending on them, and it's crazy. But we're working to address ways to centralize that information. I won't say anything more than that for now, but we are trying to solve that problem.
Yeah. I mean, like, I know that you feel this inherent need that you have to like capture every card out there and bring them all in, but ultimately you're just going to be, you can't, right? You can't get every card, you can't get every marketplace. And I'm sure you're trying to optimize your time and saying, hey, this marketplace is only doing X number of sales. Like, it was so great early on. And I don't mean this in when like marketplaces would fail or would like drop out. It'd be like, oh, good, I don't have to like keep writing queries for like that one. Like, let them go away. Like back when it was Campos before StockX and we were doing exactly what you're doing, it was like, oh, good, thank God these guys are done. So yeah.
It's crazy having 2 of the very few people on the planet that have gone through the pricing of like these very fragmented marketplaces of cultural. It's just like this crazy little twosome you guys have set up here.
I know. It really is. Yeah. And you know what? Like, there hasn't been that many other successful, because I looked at a lot, across the board as we were expanding the StockX and going other categories. We would look for, is there like a campus of like this category as a means of like trying to figure out like where there's pockets of liquidity, where there's growth we might be able to take away from eBay. And we never really found any. I mean, there was like this one like Funko marketplace or price guide that had a little bit, Hobby DB. I don't know if you know those guys, right? Yeah. But it was too focused on Funko, which is just too low of a price point. But anyway, it was surprising to me that there weren't more people that tried to do that. So
nobody's crazy enough to stay up all night writing queries. Like, it's honestly, that's what Chris and I talk about, is like, it's so difficult to do this, but like, who else is crazy enough to try?
Yeah,
I spent
matters to
18
do
months.
it well too. Sorry.
Yeah, man. That's all I did for 18 months was like sit in Excel spreadsheets with my headphones on, and my wife was pregnant with my son, and I remember through like the last I guess 9 months of that, and I just remember like towards the end of that, like I knew when she gave birth, I was like, this was going to end. I was like, it had, because that was our second kid. I had one full-time job. I was spending every waking second like writing queries, and she didn't understand why I was doing any of it. And, you know, I barely understood why I was doing it. And like, there was no way that rationale was going to play when we had two kids and stuff like that. And so, like, thank God everything like came together when it did, which was like a week before my son was born, and I met Dan Gilbert and blah blah blah. But I remember like thinking like we went on this like baby moon, you know, vacation, and I remember like she was, I don't know, 34 weeks pregnant, you know, like, and spent most of the vacation. We were at a beach somewhere. She spent most of the vacation sleeping, and I spent all the time sitting there like at my computer doing this. Like that was our vacation. So yeah.
Building a business isn't always pretty, is it? There's definitely the ugly, like behind the scenes stuff that's not on social media.
It's like never pretty. So
I got something I want to talk about before we run out of time. Josh, because, you know, you and I talked about this a little on text, and there's not a lot of awareness, and for good reason. It's very convenient to tell the story that the pandemic triggered this hobby boom, and it's really easy to understand. Everybody's locked away at home, so, you know, they have extra money because they can't do leisure activities, plus they have a lot of time. They're discovering their collections. It's a very neat, tidy story to tell. But as you said earlier on this stream, you saw cards beginning to move in late 2018. I can even speak to 2016. I remember buying a competitive advantage Michael Jordan BGS 9 in the summer of 2016 for around $110 and selling it 6 months later for $275, and realizing right away that this market's moving. And I thought about why. And, you know, it's probably because lots of people in roughly all three of our age range rediscovering the hobby, much like the three of us did. So let's talk a little bit to wherever you want to take it, about how much of this boom was actually already starting, or maybe the seeds were being planted before the pandemic started.
yeah, well, let's be super explicit. Trading cards were going to blow up in 2020 anyway. Right? It just so happened that the pandemic happened. And did that throw a little bit more fuel to the fire? Maybe, right? Just like all e-commerce, you know, grew up and benefited from it. But one of the most frustrating things, as I have watched all of these welcome to the trading card industry stories, and again, comparing this back to trading cards, same thing in 2013, 2014, 2015. There was just a flood of welcome to the sneaker industry stories of everyone continuing to tell that story. And back then, they would ask, whether it was me or somebody else, almost every time the reporters would ask some version of the question, like, you know, what sneakers should we invest in, right? And I'm like, or they would ask some question like, what's the most expensive sneaker you own, or what's the most expensive sneaker you bought? And I'm like, that's such a clickbait, like lazy question that has like so little to do with like what is going on here in the bigger picture. And in the same way where like it seems like almost every reporter starts their story with the pandemic has led to the trading card industry boom, it's like you're missing everything if that's the story here, right? You know, the first national that I went to, was in Atlantic City in like the 90s, but the first national I went to on the way back was the last one that we had, which was the summer of 19. And I remember sitting, like going there, and we had a little booth at StockX, and we're on there, and it was like, oh, this is so obvious. Like it was just all of me, right? It was just like all like, you know, 43-year-old guys walking around, some of whom had their kids, you know, other, like, it was like, you know, and I would say every smart person, but even like most of the dumb people in the industry, everyone said the same thing, which was like, oh yeah, like everyone's coming back into it. Everyone's in their 40s. They have money. Like it was such an obvious thing it's about generations, right? It's about the people coming back and trading cards being cool again. And so, yeah, it's unbelievable how much like reporters can't, like, they should be asking at least one level down, like it's unbelievable that they don't get to that quicker. And it's unbelievable that the people that speak about the industry most, like, I don't know if they miss that, or they people like talking about the most expensive car. They like saying, you know, how many stories have had a picture of Rob in his $5.2 million mantle, not to like continue to like talk shit about Rob, but it's, you know, whatever, it's clickbait versus like the math of and the supply and demand. Like, this is Econ 101 at its most basic. Like, this is supply and demand at its core. This is like, you know, first semester of Econ 101, and nobody really like wants to have like an economics lesson, right? They want to talk about $5.2 million cards. So fair enough.
Yeah. Dude, I'm with you on that, because you're right. Like the surface level, the guy who wants to make money, the article they read about the big LeBron sale or Mickey Mantle, but the actual heartbeat of the hobby is the cultural relevance of it, the generational
Totally.
attachment to it, the sports attachment. There's all these like very emotional ties to it, where we as humans just really find ourselves wanting to do it more and more. And frankly, we just like owning the cards, and we like owning the shoes, and we like physically having these things that connect us to our childhood, and they have all these crazy emotional ties. That's the heartbeat of the hobby, and that's what keeps us going forward, not these like surface level bullshit like clickbait articles, like you said. So I'm glad that you know, we're fighting the good fight as much as we can, and trying to explain that like there's so much more to it than that.
Yeah. And, you know, to some extent, does it really matter? No. But like, and most of the stuff that I see out there that's either like wrong or illogical, I'm just like, whatever. But like, that one just frustrates me because, first of all, because it's easy to go that next level down. But also, when you really like get to the core of this, right? Like, trading cards are cool again because we are now the generation who says what's cool. Right.
Yep.
We are the people who are making decisions for companies and control budgets for companies and do that. And I'll tell a story, and this is entirely a flex, right? But it's also a very relevant story on this. And I think I might have told you guys this separately, right? So about like 6-7 months ago, one of the early StockX investors texts me and goes, "Hey man, my kids are getting back into cards. Can you help us get up to speed?" And I was like, "Yeah, sure, man, no problem." And he goes, "Actually, I have to be in Detroit next week. Can I come by and you just give me like the 101 on cards?" And I was like, "Yeah, sure, no problem." So the following week, when Mark Wahlberg came to my house, well, like, that was a pretty unique day for like my wife and mother-in-law who were there that day, right? But, you know, the thing is like, Mark's a couple years older than me, like same thing, like grew up with cards, his kids are getting into cards, like it's as simple as that. And, you know, a couple of days later is when you saw him and his kids opening up boxes of Prism on Instagram. And then everyone in the hobby was talking about, hey, Mark Wahlberg's getting in the cards. And it's like, yes, he's, you know, one of the biggest actors in the world, but he's the same thing. He's the same generation. He's a sports fan. He grew up in the Northeast in all sports. And like, it's the same thing. Like, that's us in a nutshell. And like, that's the people who get to say what's cool now. And so it's different.
That's a great story.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love a good name.
And by the way, so check this out. So not only did Mark come to my house, but I was late to the meeting of my own house. So
is it true?
So he told me it was going to be a certain time, and then I figured he would like text me when he was on my way. So I like went and got in the shower, and then he showed up early, and my wife is sitting there talking to him instead of coming and get me out of the shower. So I come out, and he's been waiting like 10 minutes in my office. I'm like, what the fuck? Like, yeah.
Your wife sounds awesome.
Like, I'll entertain this dude. I don't even need you. I'm just gonna talk to Mark Wahlberg.
Are you kidding? I'm gonna just sit here and talk to Marky Mark in my living room.
Yeah, dude.
And what's great is my wife. So my wife is her whole family's from Chile, and she's the first one in her family born here. And so her mother, who was at the house that day, is elderly and she's from Chile. She has no idea who Mark Wahlberg is, right? And like later at dinner, she's like, "That guy who works with you is very nice." And I'm like, yes.
Oh, that's hilarious. Is Mark is he a cool guy?
I've got a chance to meet so many famous and high profile people, and it's been really crazy. And he is one of like the nicest, most genuine people ever. Like from the very first time we met, it was always just him. There's no like managers or people I didn't deal with. And I mean, like there was one time I was in LA and got stranded there for a day, and he's like, oh, come over for dinner. You know, like he's like the most like normal, like down to earth, like good guy like ever. And you know, I've met a lot of really high profile people, but he's one of, you know, probably a handful that are just like, yeah, like totally like good dudes in there. So
That's great.
What's he up to in the hobby these days? You can talk about it all, Marky Mark.
Well, first of all, I don't know if you saw his they finally launched Wall Street, which is his show on HBO Max about all the business he's involved in. He's involved in so many different businesses, and so they had a couple scenes that they filmed with him and his kids. Someone put in the chat, right? I think they're called Cardboard Boys, opening up stuff. So it's, you know, more as a you know, a hobbyist than anything. He's certainly not involved in a lot of business on the card side. I think he did put a check into that golden round that you know, that they loaded up with, I don't know, every person they could possibly, you know, take a $5,000 check from. But yeah, I mean, it's more about, and you know, he's a Boston guy, so you know, he cares about Boston stuff and Brady and Tatum and that sort of stuff. So.
Yeah, and plus he's got his kids involved, right? Which is good. That's what people care a lot about in this hobby, and I'm sure you think about this. A lot of people, you know, think about this too. You can just go on Clubhouse. You can't spend more than 6 or 7 hours on Hobby Clubhouse without hearing a round of discussion about how getting kids back into the hobby is very, very important. Even like we're talking about today's kids, so that this generational thing that you described can keep on happening. And Mark has his kids involved. But what's your take on that?
But real quick, it was the inverse, right? Like his kids got him back into it as well, and then it was like that was kind of what happened, was his kids were getting into it, and then he asked me for like, you know, just he's like, hey, I want to get up to speed really quickly so I can do this with them. Yeah. And you know, he's been, you know, doing a little bit, but primarily it's through his kids who are excited about it, right? So
that's great.
Yeah. So what you're saying, asking about just like kids in general with cards these days?
Yeah.
Do you think that the current like pricing structure and the way that cards are released is like isolates and makes it hard for kids to be a part of it?
There's still some stuff, but yeah, it's getting harder. Like Chris points out status, and there's still like hoops is getting expensive, but there's still some, and you know, the whole Target people camping out makes it harder for them as well, because that's usually reserved for kids. So it is tough. I would hope that the adults are funneling cards to the kids, you know, like trying to help them get it if they can't get it themselves.
Yeah. You know, there's again, like so much similarity to sneakers. The sneaker industry used to be kind of first come, first serve everywhere, and you'd have all these camp outs, you'd have people paying off managers, you'd have, you know, all the stuff. And eventually, you know, Nike really led it, but, you know, Foot Locker and the other retailers, followed, is to try to create equitable systems of distribution. So whether it was running raffles or through Nike's app, and make it so there's a fair system to be able to distribute that product. It's a tough situation to be in when, and it doesn't matter what level card it is, but if the box that you're selling at Target is worth more than what they're selling it for, well, like, then who's not going to buy that? Like, if a widget is worth $100 and it costs $10, well, who's not going to buy that widget? And there's a very liquid market. Like, you can't fault resellers or like from doing that. Like, it's just economics. So how do you change that? Well, there's a lot of it's a very complicated system-wide, you know, issue that starts with the manufacturers, Topps and Panini and Upper Deck, figuring out a way to release cards at a true market value, which is a complicated thing. And by the way, these companies are not direct-to-consumer technology companies. They're old school, you know, printing and distribution consumer goods, right? They design cards, someone else prints them, they sell them to distributors, right? And they don't do anything in the middle. And so Panini's done a little bit of direct consumer. They have a Dutch auction, which is not a Dutch auction. We can spend a whole hour talking about how like bad that is. But this is the dichotomy in the industry, and I think that we won't have a really fair system for anyone until the manufacturers take a really active role in figuring out like a direct-to-consumer model that creates equitable distribution. And it is a complicated thing, and so you go back to, no matter what you do in the interim, if you don't have that holistic system, anything you do are just patchwork things. Like, hey, maybe we can like funnel some of these cards to these kids, but guess what? Like, if it's still, there's a 10x difference in value, like their father's still going to say, hey, we should sell this, and then we can take the money and go buy something else, and like let the kid buy something else with the $100 he can get for saving $10. And like, by the way, that's the right thing to do with that. That's the right thing to do if you can do that. So it's a really, really tough situation. It is not as simple as just, hey, there should be cards available at Target because of all the things around it. So it's a big issue. Yeah.
I'm going to do something that people will hate because it goes against the idea that, you know, it suggests that there's things out there actually that are accessible to kids, which, you know, for a lot of reasons, we don't want to make it seem like it's too accessible. But, you know, having tracked, thanks to Christina's research, all of the raw Prism rookie cards of this year's NBA Prism rookie class, there are dozens of rookies that have cards that sell every day or every other day on eBay. Prism, the premium mid-tier brand, for $1, $2 all day. And when I was a kid, I wasn't collecting Michael Jordan inserts and PSA 9 cases. I had my binder that had 93, 94 Ultra. I collected Hakeem Olajuwon base cards from Hoops, and I loved the hobby. So I do think that there's an opportunity to buy singles, but I understand the blowback that I will inevitably get from saying this because it doesn't address the retail problem that Josh eloquently laid out. Doesn't address the distribution problems, but still there are cost-effective ways for kids to participate in this hobby.
Yeah. And by the way, like, what should happen, right, as more and more products hits the shelf, as Panini puts more and more product out there, that the resale price of these products should come down closer to what retail price would have been. And so whereas there's this initial like bump, and everyone, you know, there's all this FOMO and everyone wants to get the stuff. But, you know, like, even look at Panini starting at $2,000 a box direct to consumer, right, for a hobby. And that's hobby. So like, we're not saying that's what's available to kids, but even that like came down a little bit when everyone's like, okay, like that's not actually the right market price for that. The problem is, like, the kids need to be able to access essentially eBay or the places where market price you know is available, or go to Blowout Cards, or go to Dave Adams, or go to some of the other sites that you can buy this on the secondary market. You just have to wait until that kind of settles out and what the true market price should be. Like, a box of hoops should end up being like affordable. It's just, you're not going to get it at Target immediately. You're going to get it when that price, you know, kind of like washes its way out back to what it should be. So.
Yeah, people that are missing out on the Target retail aren't mad that their kids don't have something to rip. They're mad that they weren't the ones that were flipping because they weren't first in line. That's the problem.
1,000%. 1,000%. All of the animosity in the sneaker industry. You go on Twitter at, you know, 10:01 a.m. any Saturday morning after like a Nike drop, and all the people that are mad, they're not mad that that everybody couldn't get a pair. They're mad that they weren't one of the ones to get the rare pair, right? If everybody got it, then nobody would want it. So it's that thing.
It's good to hear your take on this. You've got more experience than anybody in the hobby because you've seen a whole different round of this.
It's identical, man. It is unbelievable. Every day, more and more, like, just so it's just the exact same thing. The only difference is that trading cards are true investable assets. And they store a whole lot better, so it makes my life a whole lot easier. From
I can see behind you.
We can see behind you, yeah.
Here,
you need some space.
You want the really quick view of the whole room?
Oh my gosh!
Look at that, like, really quick, yeah.
And he's like, my whole card collection's right here in my right hand.
All right, Josh, let me fire up one last question to you, and then maybe I'll leave some time in case Cardboard Chronicles Josh has a question too. So where do you see the hobby going in the next few years?
Yeah. are we done saying like what inning it is? Is that just like?
I was gonna ask you, what inning are we in, bro? What inning?
That
Come
was gonna
on.
be Josh's question.
You're there. There's my question. What inning are we in?
Yeah. So I've actually developed a different take on that, but I'll use the inning analogy, right? So in people, we're in the fourth inning, right? In prices, I think we're in the seventh inning,
Yes.
and in company infrastructure, we're in the second inning, right?
Ooh.
It's just there's there's enough people in there and enough people with money that they're overpaying for what the supply and demand is, and so like there's still a long way to go, and getting from the seventh inning to the end of the game, or I don't know, maybe this whole thing it's an extra inning game, so we don't, who the fuck knows, right? But like prices are clearly ahead of where I thought we'd be, because the people is the numbers that drive demand, right? So as more people come into it, demand goes up. But the people that are in it, there's enough money that prices are now outpacing the people side of demand. But the company infrastructure, where Topps and Panini and Upper Deck and how they will change, how PSA will change, how the distributors will change, how pricing will change, all of that. Like, man, we are in the second inning of this. Like it is really, really early on that side. And so that'll be really interesting to see if that has a outsized effect on prices. I don't know if it will. But anyway, that's kind of how I see it between the three big buckets.
Man, that was super insightful. I thought it was a great answer. I like how you broke that down.
Thank
And
you.
I like the realistic approach to pricing, not trying to get people too overly excited that we're early and trying to take a nice logical approach to that. That was great. I don't have anything else, man. I was awesome. I love this time.
Yeah, dude.
This is great, man. I love talking to you guys. It's good to have smart people out there continuing to talk about cards, and so the fact that you guys do this every Friday night for what do you do? You talk for 9 hours straight? Is that how this works?
Yeah,
3
we're
hours.
just getting started here.
I mean, you'll still be awake, so just hang around, man.
Oh no, I'm always awake, so it's good for me. But this is great, man. Thanks so much for having me on. It's always a blast talking to you guys.
Thanks for coming on, man.
For sure.
Thanks, man. That was great.
Yeah.
Dude, that last question was great because can you think of someone that could answer that question better given his context of him having seen something similar with shoes and he's involved in, is there anyone else that could answer that question better, honestly?
Well, so I took 4 pages of notes as he was talking.
God, where's this book of all these notes?
I said, where do you see the hobby going in the next few years? I wrote it down, I circled it, because everything that we were talking about in his experience and his insights built up to that question in this discussion. But then when he answered it, like you said, in the way that he broke it down into 3 categories, and he said that each category is in a different inning, was a way that I have never heard anybody express it before.
Well, I like that the theme for me was that he doesn't want to take the easy out on any of these answers and the questions that people ask. It's never easy, especially when you're dealing with emotions and nostalgia and all these like intangible things that you can't quite measure, so that the easy answer is never there for this hobby. And people were looking for the easy answer in NFTs. They're looking for just like, what's the price? What's it going to be? What's the best investment I can make to get money back in the future? And it's a hard question because this thing has layers to it, right? We've got all these different factors. We've got industries that are still trying to figure out their place. We've got people still coming in trying to figure out what they like, what they don't like. We've got the pricing models that you and I look at all day. So there's just, man, I like that he's got me thinking about different things, and that's the best answer I could think of for the inning question. And he somehow made me not hate innings as much just because of like, okay, now we don't have to, we're playing 3 games at once.
Yeah. It's a triple header, but all going on simultaneously. It's good. It's a great answer. Good timing too, because it's time for the clubhouse after party. So we're heading over to Clubhouse. I will make a room within the next few minutes, and you guys know the drill now, how Clubhouse works. Hopefully everybody who needs an invite has gotten one, but if you don't, message me. I've got a few extras.
Don't message you. You're going to be busy.
Or don't
message Christina.
Message Christina. Yeah, so thank you, Christina.
You're welcome.
Christina never has popped into an episode as many times as she did on that one either. So that's high praise for our guest, I think.
Yeah, she liked the Mark Wahlberg stuff, and I do too. I think dude, you know how much we talk about celebrities on the show, but Wahlberg is in my top. Wahlberg's in my top like 5 of that whole Timberlake LeBron thing. He's awesome.
I did not know that you were big on Wahlberg.
I was waiting for Josh to ask Luber about Timberlake.
You know what? I gotta.
When he was talking about like how he knows, like he's met so many famous people, and Mark Wahlberg's just such a stand-up guy. I was like looking over, waiting for Josh to be like, "And what about Justin Timberlake?"
No, Wahlberg scratched the itch for me tonight. It's because again, if you'll notice the pattern of guys that I like, it's that he is very what's the word? He does a lot of things, right? He can rap.
Yep.
He can act in comedies.
Yep.
He can act in action movies, and I think he's very, very good. You know, like some people might say some of his movies are cheesy. I think they're really good. All of his stuff.
His brother makes a mean burger.
Wahlburgers.
Yes.
Yes, and his kids.
Have you seen Ted and those movies?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Dude, he's hilarious. The Other Guys is like one of my favorite top 10 all-time favorite movies. That was the first comedy that he did, and I've seen an interview where he talked about that movie.
That was about a baseball card.
Was it?
No, or is that that's the Bruce Willis one that came out at the same time?
So you're not just a voice. Yeah, okay, all right, good. Let's continue this on Clubhouse. See you guys all over on Clubhouse.
You don't get to tell me when the show ends.